Hello and welcome to GMT. David Bowie, rock legend, actor, poet and master of artistic reinvention, has died. He was 69, he'd been suffering from cancer. Over a career spanning 4 decades, his musical style and onstage personae took him from the iconic 70s alien rock star Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke. He also starred in 3 feature films and pioneered the use of videos to promote his music. Nina Warhurst begins our coverage.
Ground control to Major Tom.
David Bowie's Space Oddity brought his first major hit. The sci-fi exchanges from ground control, striking a chord with a public fascinated with the moon landings. Major Tom was his spaceman alter ego, and there would be many more. Ziggy Stardust was the flamboyant character who came from outer space and captured the imagination of a generation of teenagers in the 70s. Bowie entranced fans around the world, selling 140 million albums in a career spanning decades. He was the master of reinvention.
I felt really comfortable going on stage as somebody else. And it seemed a rational decision to keep on doing that. And so I got quite besotted with the idea of just creating character after character.
Only on Friday, his latest studio album made it into the shops, coinciding with his 69th birthday. But in a statement this morning, his son confirmed the news. Dad died tonight of cancer. The beauty of it is he'll always be with everyone who plays his music. I'll still miss him though, Duncan. In the late 70s, Bowie relocated to West Berlin, and there he produced some of his best-known work, collaborating with Brian Eno on Heroes. And in 1983, the Let's Dance album introduced Bowie to a whole new generation, with hits like China Girl and Modern Love.
I don't need any help. Okay. I've practiced walking for years.
And as an actor, he won critical acclaim for his role as a prisoner of war in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
I don't need that.
A man lost in time.
And Bowie kept on moving. In 2013, when many thought he'd retired, he released an album described as bold, beautiful and baffling, once again hitting the #1 spot after 20 years.
Drop my cell phone down below.
As his new album was being recorded, there were rumours about poor health, and confirmation of his death came in a statement this morning. David Bowie died peacefully today, surrounded by his family, after a courageous 18-month battle with cancer.
David Bowie, who's died at the age of 69. Well, social media has been full of tributes from right around the world. His son, Duncan Jones, posted the photograph you can see here of himself as a child, a toddler, with his father. In it, he says, "Very sorry and sad to say it's true. I'll be offline for a while. Love to all." Actor and comedian Ricky Gervais says, "I just lost a hero. R.I.P. David Bowie." Kanye West also took to Twitter saying David Bowie is one of his most important inspirations, describing him as a fearless and creative person. He went on to say David Bowie gave us magic for a lifetime. The British Prime Minister David Cameron also paid tribute, saying, "I grew up listening to and watching the pop genius David Bowie. He was a master of reinvention who kept getting it right. A huge loss." Bowie's long-term producer, Tony Visconti, who collaborated with him on most of his albums, paid tribute on Facebook, saying he always did what he wanted to do, and he wanted to do it his way, and he wanted to do it the best way. His death was no different from his life, a work of art. He made Black Star for us, the parting gift. He also went on to say, this is Tony Visconti, that he knew for a year that this was the way it would be. I wasn't, however, prepared for it. He went on to say David Bowie was an extraordinary man full of love and life. He will always be with us. For now, it is appropriate to cry. I'm not sure if we can just bring you one other. This is from Iggy Pop, describing Bowie's friendship as the light of his life. He said, I never met such a brilliant person. He was the best there is. Well, let's go to New York now, where ABC correspondent Mallory Hoff is outside David Bowie's apartment building. And what sort of response has there been there? People waking up to this news now?
Tim, good morning. They certainly are. People waking up and learning about the death of David Bowie. And in the States, this is really the death of an icon, met with so much sadness, especially here in New York. As you said, this is where David Bowie and his wife, supermodel Iman, lived for many, many years. People now walking by here this morning learning about what has happened. This really resonates with New Yorkers especially. They watched him throughout his career, 5 decades worth of music that really resonated within the city. Just recently, he was in the process. He had co-written a play that was off Broadway, supposed to have its final performance on January 20th. He's also supposed to be honored at Carnegie Hall in March. Again, just the death of an icon really resonating here.
And how creative was he there? I mean, you talked about that play just off Broadway. I mean, was he a big presence in the New York cultural field?
You know, of course he was, and I think it was on and off to some extent. You know, he spent a lot of time in the Broadway arena, the East Village, the West Village. He was someone who New Yorkers really would see around and truly appreciate. Of course, there were years of his life that he was more in public than others. You think back, though, to the 70s and 80s. This was the time period in David Bowie's life that really made him a star, that really made him a household name. You think about Let's Dance, and you just can't help but think about the impact that David Bowie has had, not just on music, really, but around the world.
Yeah. OK, Mallory Hoff, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GMT. Let's talk to Martin Ware, a founding member of the bands Human League and Heaven 17. Very sad day for all of us, I think. Quite shocking news. How much of an influence was he on the bands you were involved with and music just generally over the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah, I don't think I'd have had a career in the music industry were it not for him. He was the kind of central reference point for all the creativity that we attempted in our own crude way in comparison to what he was doing. It's hard to imagine, but some of his most significant work happened way before punk even. And growing up in the 70s in Sheffield in a kind of poor industrial environment, it was a way of imagining a brighter and more creative future.
It's
for
funny
people.
you say that. His biographer, speaking to a little earlier, was just saying he made people believe that they could be anything they wanted to be, and that was something he said that Bowie was advocating as well. You know, he liked creating these alter egos because it allowed him to be freer and more imaginative, perhaps.
Well, he spoke to a generation that were trying to redefine themselves. We're looking at the post-hippie period. The 70s were like post-glam, if you like. He was part of the glam movement as well. And, you know, he was an outsider himself. He looked strange. His eyes were different shapes and colours. He looked like an alien, but also he made it cool. He made everybody feel cool. And the unique thing about artists is they have this ability to connect directly, one-to-one, with each individual listener. And he had this unique talent.
What about musically? What did he bring, do you think, to the music you were creating at the time? Because it was always so different, wasn't it? I mean, you know, the Black Star, which I haven't heard yet, but I'm told is pulling on a lot of, sort of jazz influences. But then if you look at all the other albums over the years, everything just seemed to be this sort of evolution, didn't it? Or shocking in terms of picking on different other different musical.
Well, the key thing is he'd already established he was a fantastic songwriter with Ziggy Stardust and Hunky Dory, Aladdin Sane, Diamond Dogs. He'd already done that concept album thing. And then he came along with his Berlin period with Low and Heroes, and they were a massive influence on the early Human League and Hammer 17. And, you know, introduced us to people like Lou Reed and to a certain extent Iggy Pop. Everything he touched, if he endorsed it, it was cool, as far as I was concerned.
Did you ever get to see him?
I went to see him a couple of times, one in Sheffield, one in London. He came to one of our gigs in 1979 at a pub in Fulham. He turned up unannounced.
How was that? Well, did you speak to him afterwards?
He came into the dressing room before we went, 5 minutes before we went on stage, yeah, and said how much he liked our music.
How did that feel in 1979?
I was bamboozled by the whole thing. It was the biggest thrill. It was like God walking into the dressing room for me.
What was the... I mean, what did you get as a sense of him as a character there? Because other interviewers who saw him frequently said that he had this ability to make everyone feel as if they'd actually discovered something new and interesting about him. Or was his whole life really something of a performance? I mean, do you think anybody really knew what made David Bowie?
I think he was quite shy, intrinsically shy, and maybe not shy, private. And I think part of his artistic output was to leave people to try and figure out this puzzle. So his entire life, for me, was like an artistic enterprise and an art project. Even down to his final album, there are various clues about his forthcoming demise if you look back on it now. And to live your entire life in the service of art is something really to be proud of, I think.
OK, Martin, well, thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking about David Bowie, who has died today at the age of 69.